Are the Weasleys actually kind of rich? Hey, brother! Gosh, is there anything more heartbreaking than the scene where Harry accompanies Mr. and Mrs. Weasley to their vault at Gringotts? There was a very small pile of silver sickles inside and just one gold galleon. Mrs. Weasley fell right into the corners before sweeping the whole lot into her bag. For a family with 9 people, it's so hard to fathom, even with Mrs. Weasley's comment,
"This lot won't come cheap, Mum. The spellbooks alone are very expensive."
We'll manage.
But you can't help but wonder just a little bit, like, how? Because it's clear that between Arthur working a lower paying job at the ministry, the expense of sending kids off to school, and the very large nature of the family, that their financial position is always something that comes back up. Ron himself is occasionally worn thin on this very thing. "I didn't know that leprechaun gold vanishes," Ron muttered. "I thought I was paying you back. You shouldn't have given me that Chudley Cannon hat for Christmas." "Forget it, all right?" said Harry. Ron speared a roast potato on the end of his fork, glaring at it. Then he said, "I hate being poor." But I think that the entire Harry Potter saga is actually making a quiet commentary on this particular subject, and the Weasleys are at the very heart of it. They are quietly extremely wealthy where it counts. Today, we'll explain. Hey, brother! Okay, before we dive on in, I just want to offer a small disclaimer that, of course, the economics of the magical world is quite different from our own, given that there is, magic. That being said, if you're a fan of the channel, you may be wondering whether or not we mean the Weasleys are wealthy the same way that we believe Hagrid might be wealthy. Which, in case you're new here, we'll briefly explain. Hagrid lives a very humble existence, but otherwise seems to be surrounded by riches. His cabin is strewn with unicorn hairs worth 10 galleons a pop, or access to acromantula venom worth 100 galleons a pint. He's frequently giving Harry expensive gifts like Hedwig, or sometimes ones that are specifically used to safeguard treasure, specifically like his fanged wallet or the mokeskin pouch. And he has no living expenses to speak of, plus 50 years of salary behind him. It's a humble life, but quietly rich. But no, while the Weasleys and Hagrid may lead similar lives, the Weasleys don't have tons of secret gold and riches literally hanging from the rafters, unless that ghoul is just like super valuable for some reason. Did I say ghoul? I of course meant ghoul. Duh. I agree, it's a bit of a reach. First of all, we need to examine those key differences within the wizarding world because, as we mentioned before, magic is a bit of a game changer when it comes to the overall economics. We learned a little bit about this during the Golden Trio's time camping and hunting for Horcruxes, where food is rather scarce, and the associated hunger does seem to be affecting Ron the worst of any of them. This was their first encounter with the fact that a full stomach meant good spirits, an empty one, bickering and gloom. Harry was least surprised by this, because he had suffered periods of near starvation at the Dursleys. Hermione bore up reasonably well on those nights when they managed to scavenge nothing but berries or stale biscuits, her temper perhaps a little shorter than usual, and her silences rather dour. Ron, however, had always been used to 3 delicious meals a day, courtesy of his mother or of the Hogwarts house elves, and hunger made him both unreasonable and irascible. Whenever lack of food coincided with Ron's turn to wear the Horcrux, he became downright unpleasant.
Downright unpleasant.
And the scarcity of food is kind of interesting, especially in part because in that exact same chapter, Ted Tonks and company simply osseo some salmon from the nearby river. Seriously, no one thought of that. Didn't Harry spend an entire chapter learning summoning charms back in book 4? Then we also learn a bit more about magic as it pertains to food. Ron argues that his mother could make something out of nothing, to which Hermione counters, "Your mother can't produce food out of thin air," said Hermione. "No one can. Food is the first of the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law of elemental transfiguration. It's impossible to make good food out of nothing. You can summon it if you know where it is, you can transform it, you can increase the quantity if you've already got some." What was that last one? Can you now? Because on some level you might wonder, they do occasionally find food along the way, and whether it's using Muggle money or simply foraging for mushrooms and berries, and while I'm sure it would get old rather quickly, how come they never just multiply the heck out of those scarce bits they actually do find? And the answer, I think, might be skill. Ron is incorrect that his mother can make something out of nothing, but Molly's ability to multiply food in particular might be one of her more unique skills as a witch. Allow me to make a comparison. We know that Mrs. Weasley knits each member of the family and Harry a sweater every year for Christmas. However, when it comes to robes, they still have to buy second-hand from Madame Malkin's.
Red hair and a hand-me-down robe? You must be a Weasley.
I'm not saying that the ability to knit a scarf or a sweater necessarily translates to being a full-blown magical seamstress. In fact, I actually think the opposite is true. Madame Malkin is uniquely capable herself in that realm of magic, which is how she's able to run her business. But take that example and apply it back to food, and what we see is that Mrs. Weasley can feed a huge family with perceived ease. Hermione, on the other hand, who is a fantastic witch herself, can't turn a handful of berries into buckets of berries, but Mrs. Weasley on the small homestead can expand their harvest to feed her family of 9 without fail. Mrs. Weasley woke them all early the following Wednesday. After a quick half a dozen bacon sandwiches each, they pulled on their coats and Mrs. Weasley took a flower pot off the kitchen mantelpiece and peered inside. Bill and Charlie obviously aren't home, but Harry is staying as a guest, so 6 bacon sandwiches each for 8 people tallies up to 48 bacon sandwiches. And that's just for breakfast. And we get another great description while Harry and Hermione are staying at the home prior to the Quidditch World Cup. By 7 o'clock, the 2 tables were groaning under dishes and dishes of Mrs. Weasley's excellent cooking, and the 9 Weasleys, Harry and Hermione, were settling themselves down to eat beneath a clear, deep blue sky. To someone who had been living on meals of increasingly stale cake all summer, this was paradise. And at first, Harry listened rather than talked as he helped himself to chicken and ham pie, boiled potatoes, and salad. Now, is resourcefulness the same thing as wealth? Not necessarily. However, it does ensure that a fundamental need is being met heartily otherwise. From there, let's shift gears to where income in the household does come from, since that's at the very least a more traditional measure of such things. But before we dive into Arthur's contribution to Weasley wealth, let's give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. When I was a kid, if you were to have asked any of my teachers how to describe me, I wouldn't be surprised if they came back with the word curious. I was positively loaded with questions. I wanted to know how everything worked, and if I couldn't get someone to show me or tell me, half the time I would just go and wing it to see what might happen. But as life grew progressively busier, as I started a family and dialed into my career, I was noticing that I was tackling new endeavors less and less. It grew harder and harder to justify disappearing to explore some new unanswered question. But a huge part of what I've personally learned in therapy is that the time I took to explore those questions was also contributing to a huge sense of self. And what I needed to learn was how to carve time out of my schedule, not to justify the commitment to my loved ones, but literally to me. So if you're in a similar boat that you wish you had made out of 2-liter bottles thinking of starting therapy, then give BetterHelp a try and rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/super today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/super. Okay, back to Arthur Weasley and the apparently measly income he brings into the Burrow. When Harry first visits in his second year, we learn, "Dad works in the most boring department," said Ron, "the misuse of Muggle artifacts office." Ron describes it as boring, and to him, it is boring. But what needs to be outlined is that Arthur doesn't find it boring at all.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck?
Ducks go in cups, Mr. Weasley, come on. Raise your hand if you got that joke. And okay, so technically that line isn't canon, but it does speak to a point which is otherwise outlined by Fred. "Yeah, Dad's crazy about everything to do with Muggles. Our shed's full of Muggle stuff. He takes it apart, puts spells on it, and puts it back together again. If he raided our house, he'd have to put himself under arrest." There are 2 key points I want to make here. The first is that Arthur is very simply living his passion regardless of the low pay, and his clapback at Lucius Malfoy all but proves that point.
We have a very different idea about what disgraces the name of wizard, Malfoy.
Yeah, get it, Arthur! Beyond that, Arthur's low pay for his job is super reflective of the Ministry of Magic falling into the exact same trap as Voldemort himself. And from a writing perspective, I think this is no mistake. Let me explain. Voldemort fails to see the powers held in things he thinks beneath himself. Dumbledore provides a great line in King's Cross Station. "That which Voldemort does not value, he takes no trouble to comprehend. of house elves and children's tales, of love, loyalty, and innocence. Voldemort knows nothing and understands nothing. Nothing. That they all have a power beyond his own, a power beyond the reach of any magic, is a truth he has never grasped. And apply that to how the Ministry treats the misuse of Muggle artifacts department. Arthur's entire department is 2 people, himself and Perkins, but think about the key priority of the entire wizarding government. It's maintaining its secrecy from Muggles. And what does Arthur deal directly with? Muggle objects that lead to knowledge of the wizarding world, and usually at the cost of some amount of intended malice towards the Muggles themselves.
You were seen.
The things our lot have taken to enchanting you wouldn't believe. My read here is that Arthur and his department are massively undervalued by the Ministry of Magic because they believe Muggle technology to be beneath them. Arthur, on the other hand, sees so much more, that there is a wealth of knowledge to be learned from Muggles. Something the wizarding world at large fails to recognize, and therefore, with each year, slips further and further behind Muggle technological advancements. But is this also not just so what you would expect from a Cornelius Fudge-run government, just lazy and complacent? Because then, once Scrimgeour takes over the Ministry, what happens right away? I don't know whether Ron's told you in any of his letters. It's only just happened, but Arthur's been promoted. Rufus Scrimgeour has set up several new offices in response to the present situation, and Arthur's heading the Office for Detection and Confiscation of Counterfeit Defensive Spells and Protective Objects. It's a big job. He's got 10 people reporting to him now. Arthur recognized a need within the wizarding world, developed a passion about making a change and displaying empathy, and stuck with it the whole way. And you know what? He was right. Ugh, just love the Weasleys so much. Even just looking at how they spend their lottery winnings, an occurrence that seems like it should fix all of their financial woes. It'd be plenty easy to argue that the Weasleys blow their lottery winnings on a trip to Egypt. After all, didn't they just visit Bill the previous Christmas? Because yes, they did. And wasn't it just last year when Mrs. Weasley was fishing around the corners of their vault for gold?
We'll manage.
Yes, it was. Wouldn't it have been smart to, I don't know, maybe save it or some? But no. I couldn't believe it when Dad won the daily profit draw. 700 galleons. Most of it's gone on this trip, but they're going to buy me a new wand for next year. They blow all of it. Or do they? I mean, they spend it all, yes, but blow it? I don't think so, because really, what changes for them moving forward? Are they unhappy in the near future? No. Did Ron still get his wand? Did all the other kids still get what they needed for school? Are they all still fed with a roof over their heads? Yes, absolutely. But what they also now have is an unforgettable family trip to Egypt. They use the money the exact way the Weasleys find to be the best way to spend it. Time together. So do the Weasleys have secondhand books and robes? Sure. Can they buy Ron the best dress robes or broomstick? Not exactly. But is it a loving household that finds a way every single time? Absolutely. Does each and every one of their children find their talents and passions and similarly excel? Also, yes. The wizarding world is a beautiful and fun place to get lost within and is jam-packed with valuable life lessons, not the least of which is what truly matters at the end of the day. The Weasleys are rich in every single way that matters, and so what if Bellatrix Lestrange has a vault full of gold? Heck, I even think I know exactly what Ron himself might say about such things.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
Exactly, Ronald. Exactly. In the end, I think it can be summed up by these clever words on Kendra and Ariana's gravestone. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also, which demonstrates what a person values will affect their behavior and how they live, and the Weasleys have their values in all the right places. There you go, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We've just been on a huge Weasley mood here at Super Carlin Brothers lately, so if you want to find out what would have happened if Ron had been sorted into Hufflepuff, you can check out that brand new series right over here. But otherwise, guys, until next time, bye!